Hi everybody, I am Melissa, and on today's episode of my newfound sort of react series that I'm doing, I'm going to be reacting to part 2 of the Jake Paul series that Dawson is doing. Is it part 2 or 3? No, it's part 3. And also doing like a little bit of an update, reference my last video. So before I actually start, I wanted to pinpoint or highlight a comment that I got in my video. I'll put the comment up here if I can. But anyway, actually let me pull it up while I'm talking. Someone just was like leaving like some notes based off of some of the things that I was saying, and I guess since I was talking about so many different disorders at the same time, or I mentioned multiple ones at the same time, some of the points I was trying to make didn't come across the right way. So the first thing this person said is those with personality disorders don't hurt themselves, and then she's basically trying to correct me, saying that 80% of people with, I'm guessing, borderline personality disorder engage in, it's non-suicidal self-harm, self-injury, and 65% attempt to take their life at least once. Which is more than any other mood disorder. What I was referencing when I was talking about the difference between personality and mood disorders and hurting people versus hurting themselves was just in reference to the symptoms in general. It's like just like so that people could have a basic understanding of the difference between the two. People with personality disorders, their symptoms are very hurtful towards others psychologically. Versus with mood disorders like depression and anxiety, their symptoms are more like internal and mental and hurtful in themselves, more so than others. It doesn't mean that other people don't suffer around them. Like you see your son or daughter with depression, you know, you'll feel some type of way as a mom or a spouse or whatever. But it was just to have like a basic understanding of the difference between mood and personality disorders. So kind of wanted to clarify that. And then saying borderline can't feel empathy, I don't remember saying that. I was referring to antisocial, so there was probably something there that didn't make sense. Antisocial personality disorder or sociopaths don't feel empathy. So anyway, she gave an example, and then something about histrionics don't go to therapy. I wasn't referring to either of those. I was referring to antisocial. It's very rare that someone with antisocial personality disorder would go to therapy. Very rare, unless they have to for whatever reason. So I just wanted to clarify those couple things because, again, like when you're talking about so many different subjects, it can kind of get a little or very confusing. So today's video, I'm just kind of gonna do a little bit of a commentary. I don't want to go into too much detail because I feel like my last video was so long. I don't want my video to be that long. So I actually already watched the video twice, and I have just a couple comments that I want to add. I also want to try to insert a clip of the video itself, reference some of the things that I'll be talking about.
Okay, I wanted to like jump in and do an update and also a disclaimer and also an apology. That's a lot.
I gotta go.
I do actually want to apologize because there was some backlash and people feeling offended and feeling like I was making a horror movie out of an illness or disorder. And I 100% understand. I think I got carried away with the whole like, ooh, I can make this scary. I love it.
So I found it interesting that a lot of people were upset with the therapist from part 2 and in the way that she was describing sociopaths or antisocial personality. And I guess it's understandable because when you don't know too much about the subject, it's very easy to form an opinion and get upset. And it's also kind of it's also kind of ironic the way that people were then in turn attacking the therapist. Like, it's very hypocritical. Like, how are you going to be upset that the therapist, in your opinion, was being unprofessional in the way she was talking about a disorder, but yet it's okay for you to go ahead and like attack her and tell her that she needs to die? Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. The difference is, I understand saying, oh man, like it seems weird that she's talking about it with like such bias. like she really doesn't like people with antisocial personality disorder, or like she really doesn't like sociopaths. And everybody has bias, even therapists have bias. So that's why as a therapist you need to like self-reflect, and you need to understand what populations you feel comfortable working with and which ones you don't, so that you can be effective in therapy. Like, you can't pretend like you don't have a bias. That's just not reality, and that's not true. You know, anyone who wants to say they don't have bias is just kind of ignorant, basically. So, and then I do understand how maybe some people didn't like how they were basically, in a way, like making it seem like Jake or Logan Paul may be sociopaths or may have antisocial personality disorder. And the whole idea of someone diagnosing another human being and talking about it like this over the internet is kind of inappropriate. I could understand that, because usually when people do like exposés, right, on this kind of stuff, it's criminals, and they're kind of already dehumanized because of the things that they've done. In some extremes, they're mass murderers. But in this case, that's not the case at all, right? So it seems really inappropriate, and I totally get that, to point at saying this person may have ABC, XYZ. So I can see that. But the other flip side of it, if you want to have an optimistic view on it, is I think it's good that we're stirring up these kinds of conversations, because a lot of these things, when it comes to like mental health and childhood and parenting and relationships, a lot of this stuff doesn't really get talked about. Not to this scale where you have millions and millions of people being exposed to these terms, to these words, to the repercussions and the way that it can be caused and all that stuff. So you got to take the good with the bad. Like, some people aren't going to like it. You're going to get backlash. You're going to get criticism. You're going to get all kinds of stuff. But at the same time, I think most people appreciate what Shane's doing. In his video, he said, like, if one person feels offended, he feels bad. And even though thousands and thousands and maybe even millions of people like the series and appreciate what he's doing, just the fact that he's getting hundreds of messages of people who don't really like it is enough for him to feel like he needs to address the issue. Which I respect that, and I think that's really big of him and awesome of him, you know? I did find it kind of interesting at some point where they were talking about the sociopathic spectrum, and how Logan was saying that he doesn't think he's a sociopath, but he might fall within the spectrum.
So I'm not a therapist, and Katie's not around, so I don't know what all this means, but I'm going to kind of go over it. He said, I'm on the sociopathic spectrum. I wouldn't say I'm a sociopath, but I would absolutely say I have sociopathic tendencies. And
I guess technically, again, I haven't worked with this population. This is me sharing based off of what I've learned in like 6 years of going to school, studying psych and mental health, and then also working as a counselor and a therapist for like another 5 years after that. I didn't always work with this kind of population, because if I ever had a client or a student that showed these behaviors and I knew I wasn't going to be able to help them, like, you have to self-reflect. You cannot help everybody, whether you're a therapist or not. So you have to point people in the right direction. Anyway, so what's the point with saying that? I don't know. My point is, I've never heard of a sociopathic spectrum, but what I have heard of is people can have, and I mentioned this in my first video, people can have a subclinical level of certain personality disorders. Whether it's antisocial or what have you. Sociopath is not something that's diagnosable. It's not something like if I were to go to therapy and I had similar behavior to some of these people that we're talking about, I would be diagnosed as antisocial, not a sociopath. So in line with that whole thing, like, diagnosing people, if you're not a professional, is not good. You know, putting labels is something that a lot of people get upset with or get upset over, especially if it's used in a like derogatory, condescending kind of way. The point of these labels is supposed to be to help people in the long run, you know, like when they go to therapy, okay, this is what they have and this is what the science and all the evidence-based research shows is effective in helping people with this kind of behavior, whether it's antisocial or borderline, histrionic, narcissistic, whatever it may be. This is what works between medication and therapy. These are the skills and techniques that you need to use. These are the activities that you need to do. This is the medication you need to take, whatever the case may be. Those labels are there for the therapeutic process in order to help someone. But now you're blurring the boundaries and talking about it on social media and throwing it out there and speculating, and that's where it can get messy, and clearly it has gotten pretty messy. Diagnosing is okay when it's done by a professional in a professional therapeutic setting in a safe space. Obviously, when it comes to the therapist and some of the backlash that she got, like I said before, I was surprised. But of course, it was the way that it was edited and the way it was made. It was made to be like sensationalized, to make it fun and interesting and entertaining, and you know, that's the whole purpose behind it. So sometimes when you watch these things, you kind of have to look through it through a lens, like what's the purpose? The purpose is to be entertaining so that people watch it and talk about it, which I didn't really feel like there was anything blatantly nasty and inappropriate that was said by Shane or Katie, the therapist. Overall, I think that this whole thing is great. It brings out discussion, it brings out awareness and educates people, gives us knowledge on different kinds of personalities that are out there, whether they're diagnosable or not. You know, you might see someone and not realize, oh, you know, they're kind of manipulative, or what they're doing is actually manipulation. I don't like that. It makes me feel uncomfortable. So now I know to limit my interaction with this kind of a person, like to start setting boundaries and know, like, hey, I might see you in school, might see you at work, might see you, but like, we don't have to hang out outside of that. Like, this is a person that's probably going to end up hurting me in the long run, you know? So when it comes to the rest of this particular video about the family, I don't want to go too in depth or in detail on all these things, but like I mentioned in the first video, when it comes to anyone in life, we are a product of our upbringing. We're a product of our family and our environment and our surroundings. I mean, that's like kind of sort of goes without saying. That's basic psychology, that's basic sociology, that's history, even that kind of goes without saying. But when you dive deep and you want to understand why a person behaves a certain way and why they act a certain way, of course there's a lot to be said about how their biology plays into it, but also how their environment has played into it. So it's very interesting in this video to meet and see the mom and the dad, and you know, just how they just kind of get to know them, get to know their personalities, and see like little cues, little red flags when it comes to boundaries and parenting. I don't remember, I confuse the two because I've actually never seen a Jake Paul or Logan Paul video, so I guess it's good in a way because this is just like a raw reaction to like from someone who's never seen their videos. But one of them was saying how there was like a clip in the video where one of them was saying how the dad beat them, you know, and maybe he was just using that word to be dramatic for his video, but at the same time, like if your parents never hit you, you wouldn't say, oh, you beat me. You know, if your parents only spanked you in times where maybe it was appropriate to spank, if you believe it's appropriate to spank, it's different than saying you beat me. And anyone who's studied enough psych or is a therapist would understand how maybe excessive physical discipline can lead to certain personality disorders or just dysfunction as an adult, you know, in general.
When Jake walked out, he literally turned back around after he saw his mom was down there vlogging, like he didn't want to come down. I'm sure that the mom loves them, and I don't blame her, because I think she's probably so excited that people are like watching, and she has a vlog channel. Maybe she's feeling a little bit like, oh, I have a thing too.
100,000 subscribers, vlog mom. Look at that! I love it, you guys, and it's all because of you.
But what was their childhood like? Were there no boundaries? And I don't know.
There was a couple scenes there where it just seemed like there were some weird boundary issues with the parents. Even something like the mom blamed the dad for not teaching the son to like open the door or something like that. You know, while it may be true that you feel or you believe that the man should do that, you can still teach that as a mom. What if like you're a widowed mother and you don't have anybody else to help raise your son? There's always other people. There's grandparents and uncles and cousins and friends and, you know, just other people that can be role models. But at the end of the day, like, don't underestimate your role as a mom in shaping your kids, whether it's for the better or the worse. Like, that blaming thing is not a very healthy form of communication. So, like, the biggest thing that I see here from just this video and a note that I wrote down is, like, jokes. Jokes are, like, okay, but there's something called a line, and I think I mentioned this in my last video. A lot of us have enough interpersonal, intrapersonal intelligence to know like where the lines are, where the boundaries of society and interacting with others are, but some people really just don't, and that's what can lead to this, like that excessive joking and excessive even competition, like we talked about in this video, or like Shane talked about in this video, can cause just some of this weird social behavior. If you don't want to call it sociopath or antisocial, it's just weird and inappropriate when it's to an extreme.
And smashing it right in front of the dog.
Really?
And it's like, be quiet. Like it's like a joke. And the dad's just like watching.
Like my new shirt.
You guys like my new shirt?
So to wrap it up, the last thing that I'd like to say is I feel overwhelmed watching this as a like former therapist, I guess. I feel overwhelmed thinking of the burden of, like, imagine having to work with someone, like imagine actually having to work, let's say, with Jake Paul, right? In therapy, and you're seeing the big picture. It's kind of overwhelming because really the best way to help is in a way to help everybody, to get everybody on board. But the reality is also you can't always do that, right? So in an actual session, you would encourage the possibility of having family therapy and family sessions, but if that's not possible, it's okay. You can work one-on-one and teach the person that at the end of the day, they have to take responsibility for their actions and their life, and slowly kind of give them the tools to learn to cope with the people around them, and also how to manage their own feelings and their own like impulsive behaviors and stuff like that, whether it's just counseling, reading self-help books, medication, if there is medication. Therapists don't usually medicate, etc. So anyway, it's a big responsibility, and I could feel like the heaviness at the end there. Like, I connect a lot with Shane in the sense that I feel it, you know, it's the empathy thing. Yeah, it feels really heavy, especially there at the end when he's talking about like wanting to really help everybody, which he's not going to be able to, you know. Yeah, so I mean, the rest of my notes are pretty much the same. There's a clip there that he put at the end of Logan Paul saying something about he is not a sociopath, but he may have sociopathic tendencies, which basically just means certain traits, right? Certain traits that fall in line with that. He may not be as empathetic as other people. He may be motivated by growing his channel with doing like really outlandish, crazy things, you know, kind of like downplaying it, and that's okay. I mean, I guess it is what it is, right? You can't force someone to like understand that maybe they're a little inappropriate, but sometimes like going through these things, like getting like really big public backlash with what happened in the suicide forest and all that, that kind of like forces a person to become kind of introspective. You know, sometimes you have to go through those things to learn. It's natural consequences. That's something that I've always talked about when I worked as a therapist. I usually worked with teens and with kids and families, and then I became a school counselor, and same thing, working with teens and families. But natural consequences are a part of life. The more you try to like shield someone and protect someone and like not let them deal with it because you want to keep them safe and you don't want them to be hurt, that is probably like the biggest disservice you can do to a person. So dealing with the consequences, learning is what's going to cause learning and growth as a human being. So anyway, that's it. That's all I have for this video. Hopefully this was kind of insightful and useful. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you want to add anything or disagree with something that I may have said, I really actually enjoy hearing that. I'm assuming there might be some people in the therapy community who may watch this and have something to say, so I definitely enjoy hearing your feedback. And again, I don't know if I'm going to do a follow-up or not to the next video. I guess it just depends. I may not. If I feel that I should, I will. But I do post weekly here on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Feel free to look around and enjoy my channel. And that's all for today. So until next time, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.